Sir, those are just costume jewelry, right? You can't seriously expect a discount for that, sneered the young clerk, gesturing dismissively toward the small row of miniature medals pinned subtly inside Sergeant Major Frank Colby's slightly worn jacket. Frank, 75, leaning heavily on his cane, felt a familiar surge of anger laced with weariness. These are not costumes, son. They represent 30 years of service. The clerk simply rolled his eyes. Sure they do. Full price for the coffee. 10 minutes later, as Frank sat outside, nursing more his pride than the overpriced coffee, the store's upbeat music suddenly cut off. A voice, crisp with authority, rang from the speakers. Attention store patrons and staff. This is General Alistair Reed. If you believe true valor deserves reverence, not ridicule, comment to honor them below. Sergeant Major Frank Colby, U.S. Army, retired, moved with deliberate care. The result of decades of military service and old injuries that still lingered. A parachute jump accident in Panama had left him with a permanent limp, now necessitating the sturdy oak cane he relied on. His face bore the lines of a life spent outdoors and under pressure, deeply etched, with kind eyes that had seen far too much, yet still held a spark of quiet resilience. He lived simply, on a modest pension and disability benefits in a small apartment. His days were filled with quiet routine, VA clinic visits, history books, and the occasional treasured trip for a cup of coffee and a newspaper. Today's outing had taken him to the newly opened upscale Provisions and Company. Market downtown. Provisions and Cumbers gleamed with chrome, organic produce, and artisan everything. Frank felt slightly out of place in his neat but worn tweed jacket, sensible slacks, and orthopedic shoes. But they advertised a senior and veteran discount, and he'd heard the coffee was excellent. Pinned discreetly inside his jacket was a miniature ribbon bar, including the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, and the Purple Heart. These weren't for display, but a quiet part of his identity. He rarely wore them, but on the anniversary of a tough deployment, nostalgia led him to pin them on. He approached the polished counter, ordered a large black coffee, and, as the young clerk rang it up, Frank opened his jacket slightly. "I believe you offer a veteran's discount," he asked politely, showing his VA ID. The clerk, Kevin, early 20s, hair meticulously styled, face bored, barely glanced at the card, but his eyes landed on the colorful medals and a smirk crept across his face. "A veteran's discount, huh?" Kevin said with mocking amusement. "And what are those supposed to be? Gumball machine prizes?" Frank stiffened, his hand instinctively brushing the medals. "These are my service medals, young man." "Right," Kevin scoffed, sharing a smirk with another employee stocking shelves nearby who paused to listen. "Costume jewelry for your little army fantasies. Look, old-timer, we get all sorts trying to scam a free coffee. The real veteran's discount requires a current military ID, not tin pins." "This is a valid VA identification card," Frank said, his voice low but steady, though a tremor of anger was building. "And these medals weren't bought, they were earned. They represent campaigns and actions." Kevin waved dismissively. Yeah, sure they do. Listen, either you have a scannable military ID or it's full price. What's it going to be?" He tapped the register impatiently. "The VA card is valid for this purpose," Frank persisted, trying to control his rising temper. "And those tin pins, as you called them, include the Silver Star. Maybe you should learn what that means before mocking it." Kevin just rolled his eyes again, his smirk growing wider. "Silver Star, Gold Star, whatever. Doesn't mean a thing to this register. That'll be $4.75 unless you want to take that war hero routine somewhere else." The other clerk chuckled audibly. The casual mockery of something so deeply personal, so hard-earned, hit Frank harder than any physical blow. He could feel stares from other customers, some curious, some embarrassed. No one intervened. He saw the manager, Ms. Albright, glance over briefly from her office, then turn back to her screen, disinterested. Frank's grip on his cane tightened, knuckles white. His face flushed with heat, but years of discipline kept his voice even. There's no need for disrespect, son. I'll pay. He carefully counted the exact change from his worn wallet, his movements stiff. He no longer wanted the discount. He no longer wanted the coffee. He just wanted to leave. Kevin took the money with smug satisfaction, printed the receipt, and slapped it on the counter. "Have a nice day, Sergeant Major," he sneered. Frank took his coffee and left without a word. He made his way to a windswept bench near the entrance and sat down heavily. The overpriced coffee remained in his trembling hand, untouched. The bitterness wasn't from the roast, but from the disrespect. He felt a deep, soul-weary ache, not from old injuries, but from being dismissed, degraded. He reached inside his coat, his fingers finding the familiar outline of his medals. Each one symbolized lost comrades, brutal battles, survival, not trinkets, not costume jewelry. He closed his eyes, breathed. He wasn't one to stir trouble. But this was different. This wasn't just about him. It was about the meaning of the uniform, the service, those ribbons. He pulled out his old phone, scrolling through numbers until he found it. A direct line given years ago by General Alistair Reed, his last divisional commander. "Use this only if you really need it," the general had told him. "Anything, anytime." Frank had never used it, until now. He hesitated only a moment before pressing dial. 2 rings, then the familiar gravelly voice, still sharp after all these years. "Reed. General Reed, sir. It's Frank Colby. Sergeant Major Colby, 3rd Infantry." A pause. Then warmth flooded the general's voice. "Frank, by God. It's good to hear you. How the hell are you, Sergeant Major?" "I'm well enough, sir. Mostly." Frank briefly explained the incident at Provisions & Co. His attempt to use the discount, the mockery, the apathy from management. Not as a complaint, but as a report. A matter of respect, publicly denied. "Provisions and cameras on Market Street, you said?" The general's voice shifted, now cold, focused. "And this clerk mocked your medals? Called them costume jewelry?" "Yes, sir. And the manager did nothing." "I see," General Reed said. Just 2 words, but they carried weight. "Are you still there, Frank?" "Yes, General, sitting just outside." "Don't move. I'm downtown for a meeting, less than 5 blocks away. My schedule just changed. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The call ended. Frank sat quietly, stunned. He'd expected maybe a call, a letter, not this. But Reed had always stood by his soldiers. Exactly 10 minutes later, the store's curated background music suddenly cut off. Then, a sharp click, and the unmistakable voice of authority filled the space. "Attention, Provisions encumbered patrons and staff. Your immediate attention, please." Clerks paused. Customers looked up. "This is General Alistair Reed, United States Army, retired. I am on site." He continued, calm but steely. "It has come to my attention that a decorated combat veteran, Sergeant Major Frank Colby, was just insulted by an employee at your front counter." A stir ran through the store. This employee not only denied a valid veteran's discount, but mocked the medals Sergeant Major Colby earned in service, calling them costume jewelry. The store manager witnessed this and did nothing. Kevin froze in place. Miss Albright appeared panicked at the edge of the floor. This level of ignorance is not merely unprofessional, it is a disgrace, and it will be corrected immediately. The PA went silent. The store fell still. Moments later, General Reed, escorted by a baffled assistant manager, stepped onto the floor. Even in a civilian suit, his presence commanded attention. "Miss Albright?" he asked, his voice firm. "And you," he said to Kevin, "are the one who thinks service medals are costume jewelry?" Kevin gave a miserable nod. "General, I'm so sorry," the manager began, but Reed cut her off gently but firmly. "It's not a misunderstanding. It's a failure of training, of leadership, of respect." At that moment, Frank was escorted back into the store. The general's expression softened. "Frank," he greeted warmly, "good to see you upright, though I regret the circumstances." He turned back to the manager and clerk. "First, you will apologize to Sergeant Major Colby. Immediately. Sincerely." The two stammered apologies, fearful and clumsy. Frank nodded once, tired. "Second," Reed said, "this store will donate a significant amount to the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans in his name. My office will follow up." "Of course," Ms. Albright said quickly. "Third," he continued, scanning the crowd, "this store will now close. All staff will undergo immediate sensitivity and respect training. My foundation will provide the trainers. You will reopen tomorrow with a better understanding of the meaning of these symbols and of service." Gasps rippled through the store. Albright protested. "General, the revenue—" "Consider it tuition," he replied, "in the cost of respect." The store closed. Training began, led by a no-nonsense retired master gunnery sergeant. Customers were thanked and asked to leave, many offering nods of approval. General Reed took Frank to a quiet cafe nearby, Not Provisions & Co., where they shared coffee and a hearty lunch. They caught up, the general listening as Frank shared his struggles, perhaps for the first time in years. Before parting, Reed handed Frank a card, direct contact to his foundation's Veterans Support Network. "No soldier of mine gets left behind," he said gruffly. "Not on my watch." The next day, Provisions & Company reopened. A sign now hung prominently. "We proudly offer a 15% discount to all veterans and active duty military, every day. Thank you for your service." Kevin was still employed, but markedly more respectful. Ms. Albright launched the new training protocols with vigor. The story spread: a general, a sergeant major, a store, a reckoning, and a reminder. Sometimes, even in unexpected places, honor must be upheld. Because the medals? They're not costume jewelry. They're the cost of freedom.